Alright, is it able to? Yeah, okay, I think it's able to hear me now. Hmm, let me quickly get the video link. Oh shoot, that did not come out well. I forgot to change the thumbnail, didn't I? Oh yeah, I did. Damn it, let me just. Hmm. Alright, should start in a while now. That should do it. Mm. Okay, there is um a problem with my mic. I didn't notice that. This is gonna take a while, isn't it? Oh well, darn. Should I wait for some people or should I just start off immediately? Mm, okay, I'll start. Alright. Hello everybody, I'm Temmie and welcome back to my code stream. This is like my second stream now, but I don't know what happened. I deleted the first two. So today we'll be starting off with a few basic coding, right? So let's just say this is our first tutorial. Now, I'll be teaching you Python. Python, I'm expecting you guys have some prerequisites. For example, the Python IDE itself, interpreter, and VS Code. Alright, sorry for the disturbance. I had to get some water real quick. I'm White Bread from the Discord channel. Alright, okay. Hello, White Bread. Today I'm teaching Python. So I am hoping that you have as a prerequisite Python, Python interpreter and VS Code. All right. So just give me a minute. I'll have to do something real quick. Python, Python interpreter and VS Code. All right. All right. So just give me a minute. All right. There we go. Uh, just start real quick. All right. So for starting off, we will be covering the basics. Today we'll be covering the basics like
variables, input, output, and looping if statements. All right. If you don't, all right. Firstly, you would need the Python 3.10. You would need VS Code. Do you have VS Code? Because that's what we're using for coding today. No, no, we're not doing extensions today. We'll be covering that later. If you want Python, you can just use Microsoft Store and search for Python 3.10. From there, you can then connect your Python to your VS Code. As I said, you can use Microsoft Store. Even if you don't have Python, you can use some online websites. Like there's this one program is I will type it out. Just a second. I will also type out the text. There we go. It's like this. Uh, right on this website, basically, you can find Python, your Python IDE. It's like an online editor. You can use it to, well, you know, create Python projects. So just look up for it. You will find it. Otherwise, let's start for today. Firstly, Python is, of course, an object-oriented programming language as the fourth generation, right? If you don't know what there are the generations of programming language, there are five different generations. First of all, being your binary programming language, which is 0 and 1. Everybody knows that. Then we have assembly language, which is, the basic language, which was the first ever language created. I am pretty sure it was the first one. Then for the third gen programming language, we have languages which are not OOP, which is object-oriented programming. For third gen languages, uh, we have POP languages, which is program-oriented programming languages. Basically, OOP uh, focuses more on objects, and POP functions more on functions. It works more on functions. So that's the difference. Python, on the other hand, is an OOP programming language. We will be going through the basics of Python and seeing how it works. So, for starters, of course, we will be writing the very basic line of code that every programmer should know if they're getting into programming, which is the print statement. Now, the print statement is one of the most used syntax of programming language. So every language has its own different kind of print statement. Every single language has its own different kind of syntax. For Python, if you want to print something, you just type print and then give brackets. Of course, unlike C Sharp, C++, and all of those, you do not have to use a semicolon. Right, so once you've typed your print statement, you can now use the different kinds of data types. There are a few different data types, so let's get a few variables. So these are some of the data types we have in Python. Now, if we do type and then we do a, this will print what type is the variable a. Now, if we run it, we might get a problem. This is because a is instanced after our print statement. so you might not get your correct output. So this is the first kind of error, which is the name error, because our name of the variable is instanced or brought to reality by after the print statement. So the print statement does not know what's happening, since in every programming language, your programs always run from top to bottom. In object-oriented programming language, you can also use functions to get into a small piece of code here and there. For example, we can take as an example clock. I have created this clock project, which basically creates an ordinary clock which will print the time. Not a very complicated, right? So our main clock project basically, it has every single thing else over here, right? And then there are a few functions shown here. So these functions are instanced later on. For example, the update is calling out the update function. And even though the variables used here are instanced before this, it can still be used. That means you can jump to different lines using object-oriented programming. This is a very good part of object-oriented programming which you usually do not find in program. Also, you can also use object-oriented programming in other, like you can use the objects from one program in the other program, which decreases the time needed and decreases the space. So if we do run our code using the run Python file button over here, you will find out that it prints that the class of this variable a is an integer class, which means it stores from negatives, negative infinity to positive infinity. Now for b, if you are guessing that it will be a floating variable, which means it contains decimals, well then you're very correct. It is a float. It contains decimals. A float can contain negative decimal infinity to positive decimal infinity. Now, if you turn float into 2.5, right? If you turn it to 2.5, it will still print that it's a float. But as soon as you convert this from 1 to 1.5 or 1.0 or anything that has a decimal point in it, then your A will also turn into a float. Now C is a string variable. A string variable contains of a set of characters placed together. Now, there in Java, if you have ever used Java, the people would know that there is a difference between string and characters. But in Python, this difference was removed. String and characters are the same thing. There is no difference because all strings are characters. There is no such data type as characters in Python. And as for D, a D or D would be a boolean or a bool. Bool can only store two types of values, which is true or false. So that is the difference between all the four types of data. Alright, just a moment. Alright, let's get back. So this was the starting. Now, if you use the print statement, you will also find that you can not only print variables, you can also create your own print statements. The most common and the most used print statement in the world would be hello world. This is basically a starter for all the programmers, and if you use this, you will realize the true magic of programming. It prints exactly what you need it to. It does exactly what you want it to. So that was the basics of Python. Now we can get to some heavier and more better parts of programming, which we will. Mm, But before that, just let me check something. Right. So, just a second, I will also type out programming, which we will. But before that, let me check. Right. So, right now we have covered up a few parts, which includes data type, variables, uh, basic syntax, printing, which is output. Right. The next thing we'll be learning is operators, and then we'll be getting to lists. Now, there are a few different types of operators, but before I get to operating, I will also be telling you another very important function of programming, which helps other programmers understand what you're writing. Because sometimes your code can be complex enough that other people may not be able to understand what you have written. And for that exact reason, programmers have invented a special statement called comments. Commenting helps other programmers to understand what you have to do. In Python, your comments can be written with the help of a hashtag. This will create a single line comment, which means your comment will be only at one line, and once you get to the other line, it will not keep the same comment. If you want to do multi-line comments in Python, there is no serious function for it, but you can use three semicolons. If oh wait, sorry, you can use three semicolons for multi-line commenting. Right? So this would create multi-line comments infinitely. Then again, we have our single line and multi-line comments. Now we have covered that as well. Right, so if you put a hashtag before your multi-line comment, that would ruin it. So try to only keep either your multi-line or your single line comment separately. So now what? Alright, so now ooh, it's been 20 minutes almost. The stream's been happening. Okay, so for the next part, we will be covering. Mm, of course, not only comments, but you can also put strings in multi-line. For example, in your single line string, you use these double quotes. If you use three different triple quotes, you can create multi-line strings. And you can also print it separately, of course. So let's print this, and you will see we'll get the same output we have written here. As you can see, it prints in two different lines because our variable was in two different lines. Perfect, isn't it? So that was it for today's session. I will be continuing my session today as itself just later. Currently, I will be quitting the stream, and I will see you again later in a while. So, till then, goodbye. It was nice streaming with you guys.